Let's actually go ahead and start because
Yeah.
just owing to the changes in the schedule, many changes in the schedule, this one ended up being shorter than the others. I think we'll be fine, but nevertheless, I think we should go ahead and hear from the poets. Ivy?
Okay, well, thank you, Dan. And thanks so much for
Sorry. I'm sorry. Are we recording?
uh do,
Yes.
do do I press record?
No. Don is recording.
Okay.
And it has been recording. We've actually already seen George's harmonica in the recording.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Oh, too bad.
No, that's fine. Okay, well, thank you, Dan, for prompting me. I think it might have been Parek who prompted me to set up this panel of poets connecting with Dickinson, and I think there could be some very productive conversations between us and the Taylor Swift panel, thinking about Taylor Swift as a poet and lyricists in relationship and inspired by Dickinson. So it's a very rich field. And many poets have been inspired by Dickinson, but I chose the poets whose work I had read and loved and was familiar with. And both Rebecca and Corey have done bulletin poet to poet columns for me, and I have also asked Rosa, and I'm going to go get circle back to her and off, and get her column to put into the bulletin. So these are works that I've really loved. Um, and anyway, and also I also wanted to say that I've had my video off because I have a summer cold and I've been coughing and sneezing and it hasn't been pretty. And I've been lying down. Um, but I have been here and I've loved the panels. So our first speaker is Rosa Lane, who is an architect and a poet and the author of four collections. The one I love the most is Called Back, and it's in Queer Conversation with Dickinson, Tupelo Press, 2024. I remember reading it and the top of my head came off. And when I met Rosa, it was kind of love at first sight, right? It was the winner of the 2025 Maine Literary Award and finalist 2026 Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award. The bios of course, are in the program, so I'm not going to go through all the bios. I'm going to turn it over to Rosa now, and she is going. Oh, and I should say, in the chat are all of the handouts of the poets, of the poems the poets will be reading, and the Dickinson poems that they're responding to. So please open them up, download them, and we don't have to share screens. You can have your own handout. So if there's a problem, let me know about that. Okay, so Rosa, would you like to take it away? Start
I
us off.
will. And thank you so much, Ivy, for organizing us. And I can't wait to hear from my partners here on the panel. And thank you all for making time to attend this panel presentation. Um, my odyssey with Emily Dickinson began with Ellen Louise Hart and Martha Nell Smith's Open Me Carefully, Emily Dickinson's intimate letters to Susan Huntington Dickinson. One morning in March 2019, I walked past our dining room table to make my coffee, and the salmon-colored book and the word intimate caught my eye. At first, neither my wife nor I recalled how the book got there. Catherine later found her sales slip. Up until then, my poetry making had coalesced around growing up in a Maine lobster fishing village, daughter of a lobsterman, and growing up queer thereof in poetic memoirs. With coffee in hand, I sat down and read the introduction. Ellen and Martha described Emily's correspondence to Susan as, quote, romantic and homoerotic expressions, unquote. I did what they said, read these Dickinson letters and letter poems and see for myself. I followed their directive. On January 4th, 2020, I packed my poetry, my journal writing, and opened me carefully and left our home in the North Bay of San Francisco in solo to get our home through yet another Maine winter. My 10-week winter retreat lasted 5 years. I lived with Emily Dickinson as my sole companion. During the pandemic, I read and reread Dickinson's 1,789 poems and her 1,049, now 1,304 letters, including her 3 master letters. When I completed my reading, I started all over again, sometimes reading 100 poems a day and other days only 1. I kept research notes never intended to see the light of day. This was a private odyssey. After about 2 years, those journal notes became short lines, then poems, in dialogue with Dickinson as if she stopped by for afternoon tea. Each poem began with a Dickinson epigraph that would reverberate throughout my days, weeks, months. Each time Dickinson's, quote, "My life had stood a loaded gun," cycled through, I wrote another poem. I titled these The Loaded Gun Translation Number 1, The Loaded Gun Translation Number 2, and The Loaded Gun Translation Number 3. Dickinson's poem defined consensus on its meaning. And when I got to poem number 1737, Johnson, and read Dickinson's 2 lines, lines 3 and 4 in the first quatrain, I couldn't believe the gender fluidity of Dickinson's I speaker. These 2 lines: amputate my freckled bosom, make me bearded like a man. 2 lines, imperative sentences, exclaimed, each demand ending with an exclamation point. The gender fluidity here is poignant, and the LGBTQ plus significance profound. These 2 lines spurred my poem, Pair de Corps, a 16th century French phrase for corset. Pair de Corps. Amputate my freckled bosom, make me bearded like a man. Dickinson, number 1737, Johnson, lines 3 to 4. Pair de corps. A pair of bodies hangs from my chest, sistered and whaleboned in a cuff. I want nothing of them, still tethered and corseted. These oddments, small thimbles, 2 berries made for the mouth, speak a primal language not mine. A wolf's ravish, or the infant's pucker for milk, a utensil gorged and sucked, those fleshy hills are there for swallowing. 1, 2 drifts of snow, wind-blown, renounced, raised by slice or tear. My bust blanked, my sternum flanked by ribs basal flat like paired susurras. Phantom nipples hover endless pause. My hairless chin, dense and wild, my mouth squared, I am my beard, edged along the jaw. Tinted curls, free fall, repronouned, plumed and prow. The 2 demands for transfiguration melded with Dickinson's proclaiming herself as a bearded pronoun in MM 1283 letter, or in also she self-referenced as Uncle Emily in her letter MM 483, and her I speaker, a boy, a stag, a prince, a fellow man, an earl, a duke, and her erotic passion in Wild Nights, with its nautical imagery, evoke this poem, which mentions the French coastal city of Nantes at the foot of the Loire River, known for its sardines. French sardines. Wild nights, were I with thee. Wild nights should be our luxury. Dickinson, Johnson, 1249, lines 1 through 4. French sardines. French sardines arrive from Boston, tin-plated. Maggie levers her can cutter at the edge, jacks her hand around the lid of hunger's fulcrum. Silver-skinned and nested, their caudal fins swim a sea of marinade, white salt cured, drenched in extra virgin, beheaded and gutted by the women of Nantes. We lay each body across the soda cracker I have for days dreamed of, craving nights. Behind each pearly eye, we swim up the fishware. We spawn in sandy silt along the odic thighs of the Loire. We flutter our little deaths. In addition to Dickinson's gender fluidity and queer dimension expressed through her eye speaker's voice, is her use of the volta, or turn, in her poems, which had great impact upon me. Dickinson makes use of the volta, which may be one reason why her poems are continuous psychic fields of discovery. Most certainly, Dickinson was aware of the volta from her love of Shakespeare. His voltaic shift is explicit in his sonnet 130, which I'll read. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun? If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with faults compare. Shakespeare's setup in the first 12 lines presents his mistress in all the ways she fails male views of female beauty. Her eyes are not like the sun. Her lips aren't very red. She reeks, and she walks on the ground. But then the turn in the final couplet, lines 13 and 14, the tone steeply shifts to the rare specialness of his mistress, with which nothing can compare. The word yet, commonly used by Shakespeare, denoted the beginning of his shift, the turn, almost always appearing in the last couplet. Dickinson often denoted her yetness with such key words as till, then, or, but, among many others. Here is an example of her voltic turns in her poem, I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died. Johnson 464, Franklin 591. 465, Franklin 591. Watch for the phrase, and then. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. The eyes around had wrung them dry, and breaths were gathering firm for that last onset when the king be witnessed in the room. I willed my keepsakes, signed away what portion of me be assignable, and then it was there, interposed, a fly. With blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me, and then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see. Dickinson sets up the poem, a deathbed, the willed keepsakes, the mourners wrung dry from the tears, and then comes the derailment. A fly and its buzz intervene. We turn from the king of cosmic heaven to the fly, and death's ultimate moment is hijacked by the tiniest thing, a fly, and its buzz that stumbles. Studying Dickinson's poetic shift was instructive in finding my own. Finding the volta or allowing it is very difficult. We most easily describe what we observe, the known, but then to bring discovery into the poem is quite another matter. At its voltaic moment, its turn, the poem breaks open and allows the fly. The poem risks everything to get there. This can be terrifying for the poet and for me. The turn defies logic, loves nonlinear, reveres chaos, enjoys a mess, and heads straight to the unknown. I'll end with my poem, Limning Death, a poem in callback. I had worked on this poem for 2 years, revisioning it over and over, getting nowhere. At one point, Dickinson weighed in. The next morning, this fell out onto the paper, and I haven't changed a word since. Limning Death. 2 epigraphs. I felt a funeral in my brain. Dickinson, Johnson 280, line 1. She dealt her pretty words like blades. Johnson 479, line 1. Limning Death. Immortalities strut around this homestead as if they own everything. Their ceremonials stop at the mantle, forevering. Father's daguerreotypes seal our faces, brass matted, muted, red velvet softens a haze of black bleeding in. My little room, more shadow than light, spins on the wheel of death. I am an impalement artist, one knife toss away from the thrower's mistake. I disappear in tiny mouthfuls each day. I study any sign of being taken. My room stunned by morning. I am still here. Yesterday I died again, swept myself into a dustpan, rattled the windows like a beggar's cup. I yearn for the perennial garden, yet I have no gender, just the moon waxing her wont at the bluff. Thank you so much for listening, and there was a lot shared, so I crammed a lot in. So if there's questions later.
Thank
We'll
you.
have some time for questions, but your
Wow.
description of the Volta and the slide into discovery for the terrifying slide into discovery for the poet is so apt. For those who write poetry and also those who read poetry. So thank you, Rosa. Our next speaker is Rebecca Faulkner, who is a London-born poet based in Brooklyn. I first heard her in Amherst, Massachusetts, reading from Permit Me to Write My Own Ending, which is a harrowing, amazing book of poetry. Her new collection, Daughters of the Minotaur, engages with the life and work of 5 mid-century women artists, and is very apropos to Dickinson, as she will describe. It was the winner of the 2025 Terry J. Cox Poetry Prize and is forthcoming in spring 2027 from Regal House Publishing. So, Rebecca,
Thank you so
thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ivy. Thank you to my fellow poets and to the Emily Dickinson International Society for inviting us all to discuss how we connect with Dickinson as poets. As mentioned earlier by Dan, 2 years ago, I was invited to contribute a poet-to-poet essay for the Bulletin, reflecting on and responding to Dickinson's 1862 tribute to the fine arts, I Would Not Paint a Picture. In her poem, the speaker avows that she would rather gaze at paintings than paint, would prefer to listen to music than play an instrument, and would be infinitely happier hearing poetry read aloud than she would be writing it. I would not paint a picture, I'd rather be the one, its bright impossibility to dwell delicious on, and wonder how the fingers feel, who rare celestial stir, evoke so sweet a torment, such sumptuous despair. I would not talk like cornets, I'd rather be the one, raised softly to the ceilings and out and easy on. Through villages of ether, my self-endued balloon, by but a lip of metal, the pier to my pontoon. Nor would I be a poet, its finer own the ear, enamoured, impotent, content, the license to revere. A privilege so awful, what would the dower be, had I the art to stun myself with bolts of melody? Nor would I be a poet, its finer own the ear, enamoured, impotent, content, the license to revere. Ironic lines for Dickinson to pen, perhaps, although I feel this humility reveals another reasoning. My newest collection, as Ivy mentioned, is forthcoming next spring, and it engages with the life and work of 5 visionary 20th century women artists. Daughters of the Minotaur takes its title from the remarkable 1953 painting by British-born Leonora Carrington, one of the 5 artists my collection focuses on. I've spent 4 years writing and the last 25 years thinking about these women and their work, from research I undertook on Anna Mendietta's remarkable earth body artworks while I was a student at NYU, to a trip to Helen Martin's owl house in South Africa's Karoo Desert as part of my PhD research. Francesca Woodman's incredible photographs made in the short period before her death at age 22. Eva Hesse's haunting, playful sculptures created in spite of depression and terminal illness. And especially Leonora Carrington's surrealist masterpieces have occupied my waking hours and many of my dreams for decades. It was only a matter of time before these dreams emerged as poetry. I like to think of Daughters of the Minotaur as a renegade act of feminist invention, part lyrical conversation between women artists, part subversive reimagining of their lives. The collection utilizes techniques such as persona, erasure, ekphrastic, and epistolary as a way to respond to the different artistic movements and genres these women worked within. The act of witnessing their radical and pioneering visions, much like Dickinson's speaker positioning herself firmly in the audience, has been a humbling and galvanizing experience for me. It's been a privilege to spend this much time in the company of these artists. I feel a tremendous affinity with all 5 women and relate to many of their struggles around visibility, emigration, motherhood, and mental health. In today's talk, I will explore what it means to be the audience of an artist rather than being the artist herself, asking, is it better to bear witness to Dickinson's sumptuous torrent of sound, stirred and enamoured by bolts of melody, than to be the musician seated at her piano or the painter standing at her easel? By way of illustration, I will read 2 poems from my new collection, poems in which the speaker struggles to be both visible and to disappear through her art. The first poem, Contingent, is titled for Eva Hesse's final post-minimalist sculpture created in 1969 while she was in and out of hospital with the brain tumour that would kill her the following year, age 34. Contingent consisted of 8 large banner-like panels that hung from the ceiling, blurring the line between painting and sculpture. Each panel was made of a semi-transparent latex-coated cheesecloth, embedded at both ends in rigid fiberglass. Like much of Hesse's work, Contingent is ephemeral, impermanent, liable to decay. Contingent. From my hospital bed, I read the weather report, so I can imagine you wearing your tan trench coat with missing buttons in Riverside Park. My headaches are 7 feet of latex. I stretch them till they hang suspended, spend days smothering irregular edges, my scalp thick with wood shavings. In your absence, I am my own materials. Hours crackle and drag. You write to me on legal paper, yellow lined, one sheet longer than the rest because you have so much to say. It's absurd, this tumour, resin thick. I read the doctor's report, rigid rectangles, cheesecloth vowels. Anything is possible. Everything is worth the risk, even my recovery. A little red lighthouse, resolute, at the edge of the Hudson River. Hesse was deeply ambivalent about her work, suffering from severe creative blocks, overwhelmed by the gaps between her prolific ideas and their execution. Perhaps all women artists experience this gnawing self-doubt. I certainly do. It speaks to our imposter syndrome, our yearning to be taken seriously, and our desire for recognition. For a woman, striving to be an artist is indeed living a life of displacement. It's a man's world that we seek to journey to, and most women artists do not have the entitlements of time and space that men still do. I'd rather be the one, raised softly to the ceilings and out and easy on, writes Dickinson, revealing the complex nature of a woman artist questioning whether or not to claim space. Nor would I be a poet, writes Dickinson. Her words may indeed be ironic, but I interpret her poem to mean that another person's art, so sweet a torment, such sumptuous despair, has the potential to awe more than her own. I very much relate to this sentiment, labouring away at my poems over long periods of time, growing overly familiar, dare I say, growing bored of and frustrated by my poetry, gazing out of the window of my Brooklyn apartment, wondering whether my own poetry has the power to stun. When grappling with the blank page during this project, it often felt to me like a foolish endeavour. Perhaps I'd be better off simply admiring these women's magnificent creations than attempting to render their lives and art in my own words. And yet, I laboured on. I close my new collection with a poem titled Still Life, in which the first and last lines are taken from Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse, as spoken by the character Lily Briscoe. In Woolf's 1927 masterpiece, Briscoe is a fiercely passionate artist who worries about her role as a woman in the shadow of the maternal linchpin of the family, Mrs. Ramsay. Her work would be hung in the attics, she thought. It would be destroyed. But what did it matter? Still life. Laying down her brush in extreme fatigue, she pays attention to her posture. An apple core balanced atop a freshly scrubbed table. To February's strident chimneys, curling their lip at the yellowing snow. From an upstairs room, her granddaughter laughs, an aria with sharp edges. She listens to the Goldberg variations, the fret, the hurry, the stir. Ignores the drawing room's silk cushions, bought on a whim that spring into loose. Teaspoons tremble on the sideboard, tarnished with their own importance. She admires the wainscoting's hairline cracks, a riot of bay leaves consigned to forgotten suppers. Pays close attention to the pitch of her easel, heel of her paint. Accepts another attic-bound canvas, death's ill-fitting slippers. Celebrates the silence of a pine cone, the curve, the ridge, the stir. Draws velvet drapes against the years and murmurs, it is done, it is finished, I've had my vision. I hear echoes of Dickinson's I would not paint a picture in Still Life. My speaker experiences the unfiltered joy of owning the ear, listening to music composed and played by a man, along with the ambient sounds of life being lived. From an upstairs room, her granddaughter laughs, an aria with sharp edges. She listens to the Goldberg variations, the fret, the hurry, the stir. As I reread Dickinson's poem, it's clearer to me than ever that her speaker does not want to simply observe. Like Lily, or the speaker in my poem, she yearns to place herself at the very heart of human experience, to dwell in the bright impossibility that cannot always be captured on canvas or in verse. She wants to savour the experience of being alive, like Hesse did, in all its intensity and complexity. to admire the wainscoting's hairline cracks and celebrate the silence of a pine cone. Everything, indeed, is worth the risk. Sitting at my desk, watching the summer stretch on, I marvel at the vast multiplicity of meanings in these 3 short, remarkable stanzas of Dickinson's. Perhaps one of the benefits of being a woman artist is that we have a lifetime's experience of owning the ear while attempting to be the poet, striving to assert our place in the canon while living with the reality of having been written out of the history of art and literature for centuries. Woolf concludes To the Lighthouse with the line, "It was done, it was finished. Yes," she thought, laying down her brush in extreme fatigue, "I have had my vision." And what more can we hope for in this lifetime? To complete our canvases, pen the last lines of our manuscripts, live our lives fully and realise our visions. Had I the art to stun myself? Maybe I already do. Thank you.
Lovely. So provocative. And I am always amazed at how much work the comma does in the title, Still Life. Such a powerful comma there. Well, thank you, Rebecca. Our last speaker, Corey Jackson, Corey Elizabeth Jackson, is a retired school teacher and doting grandmother who lives with her husband, Jim, in Aurora, Ontario, Canada. So she's part of our international contingent. I came to know her through her book, Death Kindly Stopped for Me, a book of poetry inspired by Emily Dickinson, which has won 6 awards, including Literary Titan's 2025 Gold Book Award for Contemporary Poetry and the BookFest 2025 First Place Award for Poetry Collections and Anthologies. So, Corey, let's hear from you.
Thank you, Ivy. Can everyone hear me all right? Wonderful. Many thanks to Ivy having asked me to be on this panel. I appreciate very much being included in the group. The title of my book of poetry, Death Kindly Stopped for Me, indicates the connection of my poems to Dickinson's theme of death. The poems in the first part of my book personify death, as does Dickinson in her iconic poem, Because I Could Not Stop for Death. At the beginning of my book, I quote this poem in full. Death here exudes civility and is like a gentleman caller coming in his carriage to call on the speaker. The speaker is intrigued enough to go with death in his carriage, yet is the carriage a hearse? The speaker becomes dubious as the sun appears to set, and the dews grew quivering and chill. Ominously, the carriage even seems to pass beside the speaker's own gravesite, a swelling of the ground. But then comes Dickinson's breathtaking final stanza, quote, "Since then to centuries and yet feel shorter than the day I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity." End quote. In these 4 lines, the speaker's doubts about death are shattered, and she recognizes that death is her friend eternally, taking her past time altogether and into eternity. Inspired by this poem, I give death a variety of personalities in the first 28 poems in my book. Some of these personalities contrast significantly with death's personality in Dickinson's poem above. For example, in my poem, I Hitchhiked from My Home in Town, death also stops for the speaker, this time the metaphor for death being a great white car instead of a carriage. The persona of death here is female. I hitchhiked from my home in town. I hitchhiked from my home in town. Wind stirred our poplar tree. Most drivers passed me with a frown until death stopped for me. She was hesitant and drove so slowly I was shocked. Her great white car did barely move, while Death and I just talked. She knew my beloved, my daughter too. She knew my baby boy. My love for sweet death gently grew. I felt a soothing joy. Yet coy with me she then became. She turned her car around, while under a shimmering eastern sun, death brought me back to town. The day was warm, my friends were there. My heart with peace now surged. Then death receded back to where her road from mine diverged. In this poem, the speaker is not hesitant with death at all, as is Dickinson's speaker in her poem discussed above. On the contrary, in my poem, having suffered great personal tragedy, the speaker stays with death willingly. Indeed, it is death in my poem who makes a decision to not even take the speaker beyond this physical world. Death feels that it's not the speaker's time to leave this world, and death brings her back to town. Death here is not just a civil companion. Death chooses to drive the speaker back to her living family. Death in my poem does not become ominous, but becomes more like a friendly confidant. In contrast to Dickinson's poem, death in my poem does not take the speaker toward eternity, but rather back to the living world. In another of my poems, death has a more elusive personality. This poem is entitled Death Was Hovering at My Door, and the persona of death is male. Death was hovering at my door, impatient to come in, aware that he would have to wait in line with closest kin. He ended up in front of one who wept in sharpest pain, in love for me now totally preceded by death's gain. In muddled mind, across the room, I sensed the anguish clear that pierced my kin, whom death defied, standing by me too near. In sudden comfort, then I knew that death would kindly be, coming back one day soon to send my grieving kin to me. The speaker here is totally confident facing death, but instead worries about a loved one who is grief-stricken by the speaker's impending demise. In an ironic and poignant turnaround, the speaker senses inherently that death is also coming soon to take her grieving kin. The speaker and her grieving kin both will be together with death in the end. In Dickinson's poem, the speaker reconciles with death only in the afterworld. In my poem here, any uncertainty about death is resolved while the speaker is still living. My final example of death's personality is in my poem called Death Amongst the Daffodils. Traveling was I along the lane to meet my loved ones who had passed already to that spirit realm infused with gardens sweet, while I passed earthly blooms with springtime dew. My spirit guide stood patiently nearby, when suddenly saw I in golden view a host of daffodils in meadow nigh, basking in sun-soaked breezes, and I knew it was my life's departing gift to seize. The flaxen panorama floated up in yellowly shimmering shadows past the trees, toward the town where my soul was to sup. Then I and my guides to family table came, which bright rolling hills of daffodils did frame. In this poem, the speaker has already died and is in the afterworld. The all-encompassing daffodils are symbols of beauty and love in the environment of the afterworld. It is difficult not to share the speaker's overwhelming joy. Indeed, it is death that has led to the speaker's full-blown ecstasy. Death in this poem has been an invincible ally. In conclusion, there are numerous Dickinson poems where the theme of death is provocatively explored through personification. I actually mentioned several other of these poems in my Poet to Poet article that I wrote at Ivy's request. In my 3 poems above, I have shown how I have been inspired by Dickinson to explore additional ways to personify death. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Corey. We heard earlier about a triangulation with Wordsworth's daffodils, and you provided another one here. But it's so interesting how you're working in her meter, whereas the other poems are really much more kind of free verse. So that's kind of very interesting. Well, thank you, all 3 poets. It's just wonderful to hear Dickinson being inspiring and being processed through these creative, different creative personalities. We can open it. We have a few minutes for questions. We can open it for questions. Do the poets have any questions for each other? Dan.
I'm not exactly sure how to make a question out of this, but I was in both Rosa's and Rebecca's presentations, I was really struck by the ways in which you're both seeing something dynamic going on in Dickinson and in your poems. And Rosa, it's that wonderful way of talking about the volta, the turn in the poem is and that is something that I've encountered in poems. I just think about how I've tried to teach it, but that is what's there. And then in Rebecca, so I would not paint a picture was probably the first poem. I had read Dickinson since, well, for a long time, but that was the first one that really made my head come off the top of my head. That wow. And sure, I saw it as irony. Look at that, and had I myself the power to stun with bolts of melody, but what I'm seeing in the way you read it was somebody who's going back and forth, right? Who is at once knows that she has the power to, or the art to stun with bolts of melody, and is saying, God, it would be so easier not to have this. And that's so Dickinsonian from what I understand, more than I did when that first. So I guess I'd like to make this a question. Is that something? I mean, Rosa, you're of course finding it in Shakespeare and it's everywhere, but nevertheless, is that dynamic quality, either one or both of you, something that you really are drawing out of Dickinson, or simply something that you're drawing out of being poets and thinking on the page?
Mm.
Rosa, do you want to take that first?
Sure. Watching, observing, reading, digesting how other poets, including R. Dickinson, handles that moment of discovery where the poem, I think Martha Nell has described yesterday several times about that mess. Why not make a mess? Where's the mess? And boy, I tell you, I that is the goal, is to make a mess as much as possible, because that will lead somewhere. In terms of teaching the turn, this is I have a few times taught the turn. I guess, if one can say that. I would better describe it as guiding. What I do is have the young poets in the room. This just recently happened in Spokane with high school kids. The Telling and the Turn was the name of it. And they described a circumstance in the first phase of it, which we all pretty much do observe, and we can put color, and we can put tone, and we can even put music with it. in terms of our languaging, the circumstance that we're in or that we're observing, in terms of describing it. I mean, that adjectives do that. I fear them, but nonetheless, I end up crossing them out more. And then I had them put in temporarily in the second phase the word yet. And to have them lend themselves to, okay, what now is going to happen that's a surprise that may unravel everything you just wrote. And then you can take out the word yet, but to insert it in there after the circumstance is in the or the what is being observed has been presented, the context, then coming in with the word yet, just temporarily can be removed or not. It's up to the poet. Let the yetness happen. Just be messy about it.
That's the mess. Love it.
I love that. I love the yetness too. That's the best. I think that that Dan, that's definitely kind of hits the nail on the head, the mess of it, right? And I'm interested in that in obviously in this specific Dickinson poem and in Dickinson in general. And it's interesting that Rosa was talking about a workshop with high school students. I was at the New York Poetry Festival last Sunday with a group of high school students in New York, and we were talking about the impact of AI on writing poetry, right? Which is a conversation we're all having at the moment, for better or worse. And one of the things that we agreed on, me and these juniors, is that the mess, AI can't replicate the mess, right? And right, I see all of you going, yeah. The mess and the conflict and the confusion and the tension. And I'm obviously, you've heard my presentation. I'm interested in that in the women artists I'm writing about, and in poets in general, and in myself, which is the I can't do it, I can do it, I can't do it, I can't, and that kind of tension. So I think that's 100% baked into my work and the work of so many poets that I admire, including Dickinson and artists. And I think it's certainly a coup if we can convince high school juniors that AI can't write poetry and that we should just stick with that tension and that mess, the yetness.
The yetness.
Martha Nell.
Yes, let's see. I am speaking not with a profound question, but as a fangirl. This was so great. I mean, I had to turn my camera off for a minute, and I was just like walking around my study and grinning from ear to ear. And I cried a little bit too, because I'm I'm full of feels today. But thank you so much. And the comment I can make, if I may, is that this fangirl, I love the different voices. I love listening to you read with your different accents. And there wasn't treason in any one of them, to make a little Dickinson joke. But it was just, I mean, didn't y'all love their accents? It's fabulous. I mean, I can go into West Texas if you want me to, but I usually don't talk like that. Anyway,
Did I use the main accent, Martinell? Oh my gosh. Okay.
well, it sounded different from Rebecca's, and it sounded different from Corey's, and there were inflections on certain words that, of course, I didn't write down. I think, Corey, with you, I heard a Canadian. I can't imitate it. I can just imitate my own West Texas upbringing.
Yeah.
My partner laughs ruthlessly at me. What?
Mine just said I said Volter.
Okay. There you go. Okay.
Busted.
It's great. Thank y'all so much.
Okay, I think Parik was next and then Mary.
Hi, I just want to say I love this session. And Ivy, I have one complaint though. I wanted to hear you read your poems. And when we originally talked about this discussion and this session, I was expecting to hear you. But you can think about that. But I want to say I've loved these readings. I love the idea of the volta. I love the idea that Dickinson might have a couple of voltas in her poems, and maybe some of those opening lines are kind of hidden voltas that we're kind of and I love one of my favorite poems is that the poem that Rebecca talked about. I would not paint a picture, and I love the way in which you've illuminated that for me through your poem. So thank you. But I wanted to ask Corey a question. I write a little bit of poems. Don't have time with my everything else that's happening, but I've fallen in love with rhyme again. And we know Dickinson loved her rhymes or her half rhymes or slanted rhymes or whatever way. I'd love to hear why you chose rhyme and why you chose to return to that, in your poems. So could you tell us a little bit about that, Corey?
Yes, I never write any poems that aren't rhyming poems. I don't know why I veer that way with my poetry. Throughout my life, I've written poems here and there for different people for usually informal occasions. And 3 or 4 years ago, when I started writing the poetry for my book, I knew, of course, it would be rhyming poetry. And I felt inspired to express my thoughts about death through rhyme, based on that poem of Dickinson's, Because I Could Not Stop for Death, because there's so many ways to interpret it. But I knew that the poems in my book would be rhyming poems. However, I thought for a bit of variety, I would try out different rhyming forms. There are several kinds of sonnets that are in my book. Death Amongst the Daffodils, that's a sonnet. And I forget, I can't even say what kind it is now. I think it's just a basic, a Shakespearean sonnet, or I'd have to go back over the rhyming scheme. It's been a couple of years since I've studied it more closely. But and then I thought, I want to write a villanelle, there's 2 villanelles in my book. And then I thought, is it the rondeau? In Flanders Fields, what kind of poem is that? A rondeau, a rondelle? In Flanders Fields, that's a Canadian poet, but I wanted to write a rondeau. So one of my poems is a rondeau. And so I just really was inspired by that. And then I have a huge thesaurus that's a mile thick, despite having Google look up meanings and giving synonyms. I found all sorts of rhymes that were fun to work with. And so it just became kind of a hobby to express my own deepest feelings about death, in this case, in rhyme. So thank you for asking.
No problem. And so just to very quickly follow on from that, do you think that then rhyme is a sort of a kind of a way of reassuring the reader? You are going to get to the rhyme. You might not know what's going to happen with death. We don't not know, that the rhyme is a kind of somehow reassuring.
I don't know.
Predictable, the next, it's going to come.
I always loved singing when I was younger, and still do. And so many of the famous songs have rhymes in them, that are very classic. And there's something that's soothing. I find rhyming very soothing. I think that's part of it. And yeah, so it just it's been part of the way I write.
Turns out that Flanders Field is a off-kilter sonnet, according to Google. So I don't really know what that meant. And in terms of, I just gave a craft talk on repetition, and rhyme is one of the elemental forms of repetition in poetry. And repetition is really one of the foundations of poetry. And you're right, it gives us this sense of, it sets up an expectation and it satisfies it or frustrates it, or, you know what I'm saying? It moves it in different directions, but it gives us this feeling of stasis and dynamism. It's just very interesting what rhyme does. So it's just it's one of the essential tools in the poet's toolbox, and I think Corey and Dickinson uses it, and Corey uses it. So Mary, you have your hand up.
This is actually a corollary to Parek's question about sort of following the Dickinson rhyme or the Dickinson format, the ballad poems that Corey wrote. Death was hovering at my door, or I hitchhiked from my home in town. My question was just a tiny one, really. Did you feel in any way, Corey, as you worked on that kind of maybe imitation of Dickinson's modality, like a temptation to throw in the dashes, or do you go further into it like that with the Dickinson style or the capitalization? I'm just kind of curious how that worked for you.
Yes, I'm a real stickler about punctuation in poetry. It keeps me centered with how the form of my poems. And I just am looking at my copy of I Hitchhiked from My Home in Town. There's several dashes in that. And I'm thinking, well, I'm, thinking of Dickinson as I write this, and wherever I'm not sure whether to put a comma or a period or a semicolon, I'll just throw a dash in. And it seemed to work quite well to put in a dash when I wasn't sure. And I felt comfortable doing that because Dickinson uses her dashes so well. And I thought, wow, I can make them mean something as far as meaning goes. And as far as the turn goes, I really like the idea of the turn at the end of a poem, or the last two lines of a sonnet, or the yet and the but and the turn. I'm big on that too. So it suddenly your theme has a more compactness, more balance. Yeah. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Did I hear somebody say that they think there are Dickinson poems that start with the turn?
Sorry, no, what I just meant was sometimes Dickinson's poems start, with that kind of twist, if you like, the opening line. It's not a turn but I was just kind of, I love Rosa. I just love your idea. I love the volta.
Yeah.
I think Dickinson uses it a lot more. I've not thought about that before. I just loved what you said. So sorry, that was just me.
Well, if you think about it, if you read in the back, just any collection of Dickinson poems, doesn't matter what, if you read them, never again, what is it? It must have been death, for I stood up. Just start reading them. It feels like, you remember those magazines they used to have in the grocery store all the time? The National Enquirer and the World Weekly News. That's what they read like. Seriously. And that's kind of fun.
Yeah, I was thinking of of course I prayed, but did God care?
There we go.
It starts with a turn. Somebody is talking and she is interrupting and saying, but no, I did it. And it hasn't worked. So there the mess is right. It's like the opening of the poem. But that's so interesting to think about the yetness or the volta or the bolta,
Yeah.
the volta, and there at the very beginning, which would be classic Dickinson to invert that, right? Because she's the master of inversion, right?
And the power of a comma cannot be underestimated. I put in the chat, the best assignment I got my first year of graduate school is from Richard Foyer, who said to take the sonnet, Robert Frost's sonnet, Never Again Will Birdsong Be the Same, and argue either for or against a comma after the 13th line.
Mhm.
We could not write longer than 500 words, and we had to write at least 250. It's a hard assignment, but it's a great, because it makes you reread the poem and really think about it.
And I know the three poets like me have sat and agonized over a piece of punctuation. You take it in, you put it out, and you take it out, you put it in. And that's all you've done for the hour that you've been sitting and revising your poem. So we do agonize over those.
Yeah, and when I would be with a bunch of scholars and we'd get into flame wars about, whether Dickinson intended her lineation, then I'd talk to my poet friends and they would say, "What is wrong with you? Of course she's looking at her lineation. Don't be ridiculous." I mean, Alicia really unloaded on me one time.
You'll see in my poem Contingent, what I usually do is just take it all out altogether. I just use
Oh,
white
wow.
space. Yeah, I mean, a lot. If you see my books, you'll see I don't use punctuation a lot.
I can't wait to look through y'all's books.
Well, it's coming out soon. It's
I
coming out
know, yeah.
soon. Yes, we're so excited. I think we're kind of at our time. I don't, I know that at 4:30 we're going to have more poetry reading of Dickinson in honor of Ellie. But if anybody has a last word they want to say, otherwise I want to thank our poets, because being a poet at this moment in history is so important. And we need to support our art, poets and all artists, because we are the ones who are imagining something different. And we are the ones
Next,
who carry that, right?
Yes.
Ivy,
Yes.
Ivy, sorry, next time you.
I know.
That's
I'm sorry.
right.
We didn't have much time, and I wanted to give my time to to our three poets. So yes,
Well,
next time, I promise you, yes, next time I
whip
will
a
read.
poem out right now and read it.
I have tons of poems, and I will read if you want. I will read one.
Yes,
Just pull it
Um,
yes.
out.
that is
Come on.
from that is
You
from
definitely don't want to hear one of mine, so please read one of yours.
I will read. This is the one that people really like. This is from the
I know that
Dickinson
book.
within Fleck. This is the last poem, and it's called "A United Slash State."
I love this.
And you like this poem?
I
This
do.
poem gets a lot of traction, and it's in dialogue with Dickinson's "Hope is the Thing with Feathers."
Which, did you know Eve Sedgwick called that one of the weirdest poems she's ever read?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it is. It is an extremely weird
She's right.
poem,
It's
but
really
got
weird.
very popular, and it really hits people home. It hits people in their
Yeah,
chest.
I know.
So, a united slash state. Love shall always be light and light. Oh, no, that's not mine. That's Al. Sorry. Love will always be a messy, maybe flight across Dickinson's implausible divides. Can we love what is out of our hands? With two, we recognize love, but love is also many around the kitchen table, sharing bowls and breath with strangers who put us all on best behavior. Can we love what we cannot touch? Touch me, though we dwell on opposite ends of much breath. Don't let this messiness unmake us. Make it matter. Take what I offer, myself singing in windows flung open, doors refusing their jams, so we pass through, pass into each other, not passers-by, but passengers in flight, all colors, abroad, abreast, unbranded, borderless. So that's my Dickinson's bird and feathers. So
Great.
thank you. Thank
Thank you
you,
so much,
everybody.
Ivy. Thank you for
Thank
inviting us.
you, Ivy.
Thank
Thank
you,
you very
everyone.
Thank
much.
you. What a
Y'all are
pleasure. Let's do this
fabulous.
again.
You are a group of poets who, if I may quote my pal Bruce Springsteen, you do not stand back and let all be. You write things that are important.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll let
Yeah.
him know that.
Yes.
Yeah, tell Bruce.
Tell him that.
Yeah, I will. I'll tell Bruce. He's a little busy right now, but I'll tell him later.
Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you and a pleasure to meet you, Corey and Rosa.
Yes.
I've got
Thank
to
you
go.
so much for
Yes.
coming,
Thank you.
Rebecca,
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Corey,
Thank
and
you,
Rosa.
Rebecca.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.